Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Post-Podium, the podcast where former Jeopardy contestants are instead given questions and asked to provide answers. I'm your host, Jeric Brual, and in this episode, we will be continuing our coverage of the most recent Tournament of Champions. Last episode, I spoke to Tyler Rode about his TOC experience and run, and we also broke down each game in the quarterfinals, semifinals, and the special exhibition match between Amy Schneider, Matt and Mattea, and Mattea Roach. If you missed that one, I highly recommend you listen to that episode first because this episode will be all about the TOC finals. And joining me to talk about the finals is none other than Andrew He. Andrew is a 5-game Jeopardy champion who finished the TOC as the first runner-up, winning $100,000. I'll be asking him some questions about his initial run and what it was like to come back and compete in the TOC. We'll also be analyzing each of his games, including his quarterfinal and semifinal matches, in addition to the 6-game finals. As always, if you're interested in a specific topic, I've provided timestamps in the episode description for your convenience. We have a lot of ground to cover, so without further ado, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Post-Podium. Let's begin with a simple introduction, your name, the times when you appeared on Jeopardy, and how well you did and finished.
I'm Andrew He. My first appearance on Jeopardy was November 10th, 2021. I won 5 games in the regular season, and I took home a little shy of $160,000 before I ran into Super Ultra Mega Champion. I made it through to the finals of the Tournament of Champions, where I actually was able to win 2 games, but unfortunately I lost to that same Mega Champion, same one we all know and love.
Of course. So, Andrew, as I'm sure everyone remembers, your original run came to an end when you ran into Amy Schneider on your 6th game on the show. You lost on a Wednesday, so the 3rd game of the tape day, presumably. My first question is pretty straightforward. Did you stick around for the rest of the tape day to watch Amy go on to win her 2nd and 3rd games?
Yeah, 100% I stuck around. I was actually pretty pumped to see how Amy would do. I think just as a competitor, you want to see, the person who beat you, like, what happens to them. I distinctly remember that she really dominated her 3rd game, which was the last of the day. And so at that point, I'm pretty happy. Like, I did enough to get invited back to the stage. And the person that beat me is, like, very, very good, very deserving. So I definitely stuck around. Like, even aside from seeing Amy, you kind of want to get time with the other contestants. Like, when you end the day as a champion, it's like a nice feeling, but you have to hang back and sign all these papers. So everyone's gone by the time you come back out. Like, my first day, like, nobody was there. So I didn't get to talk to anybody. And then the next day, when you're kind of the returning champion, all that social time that other people get to have, like, you're doing makeup, wardrobe changes. Even though I lost, like, that 2nd tape day, I remember it was nice, like, being outside in the parking lot and talking to, like, Rebecca Clark, Jeff Myers, like Molly Carroll, who we obviously got to see play really well in Second Chance. So that was just a really nice time.
So to give everyone a sense of time, Andrew's last 3 games of his original run were taped on September 28th, 2021, and aired less than 2 months later, the week of November 15th. Amy would then go on to win a total of 40 games throughout the rest of November and December 2021, until her streak was snapped by Rowan Talsma on January 26, 2022. She didn't quite lap herself, meaning she was taping more episodes as they were airing, but she was very close to doing so. With that being said, Andrew, was there ever a point during Amy's run where you thought about what could have happened if the win had blown the other way, so to speak? I mean, just one more win added to your streak, and the world wouldn't have known about the brilliance that is Amy Schneider.
Yeah, I can't lie. I thought about that a lot. I was pretty surprised by how much my perception of my own run changed as hers kind of unfolded. Like I said, coming out of the studio after losing to her, I had pretty much gotten everything that I had hoped for, that I thought I could reasonably hope for in that experience. But then, you kind of see Amy keep winning, and you start thinking, well, dang, how did I run into basically like the toughest opponent of the season, right? And as it kind of continues to unfold, you still get people texting you like she's still on there, like, you could have stopped this. But like I think, like, real talk, like, at the time, like, for sure Amy just plain knew more stuff. And, like, even if we kind of, like, go into the multiverse and we go back and I get that Final Jeopardy right. I think in like a lot of those universes, my streak ends at like 7 games, 9 games, something like that. And kind of like you said, the greater world doesn't know who Amy is in kind of those universes. And I think if you kind of look at, you talk to Amy, you see how she's benefited from this experience and see what her run has meant to people. Like, I don't know how you like say that this isn't a good universe compared to like me winning like 2 additional games, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's my way of coping, but.
So after your episodes aired, you had roughly 10 months to prepare for the TOC, which is a bit on the longer side of waiting out of everyone who qualified. What did you do during that time? Did you do any additional studying? Were you watching the show regularly to scout your competition, or were you more or less going about your life like normal?
Yeah, like as you said, that's 10 months. I don't know. It's very hard to rearrange your life to kind of accommodate anything like this. I definitely did a lot of preparation, studying, some scouting. I definitely kept watching the show, but that was mostly to track how and whether I was improving. I don't think I did as much as I set out to do. Like in the early months, I kind of don't have the right discipline for that. But once I started to feel like the time pressure of the TOC approaching, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like LARP as like an Olympian. I don't know, just do some ridiculous stuff, like consolidate my meals into like one large meal and like just be pretty single-minded about it.
Was that ridiculous stuff before or after they gave you the dates for the TOC tape?
Some of it was kind of bursty. I would say some of it was before. I don't actually remember exactly when they gave us the TOC dates. It can't have been more than like 2 months out. And I think like 2 months is just really not a lot of time to try to make all the improvements that you, especially in this pool of contestants, that you like really kind of need to be, for at least for me to feel competitive here.
In the lead up to the TOC, a lot of fans online had high expectations for Amy, Matt, and Mattea, especially since they'd been automatically seeded into the semifinals. But outside of the big 3, a lot of people chose you as their quote-unquote dark horse pick to win, myself included. In fact, if it weren't for your Final Jeopardy get rate during your initial run, I probably would have put you above Mattea. Now, obviously, you were able to embrace your dark horse status by not only becoming a finalist, but also winning 2 games in the finals against Amy. But going into filming, did you feel any pressure to perform as well as, if not better, than you did during your original run? Or was that not something you were particularly worried about?
So I didn't actually feel very much external pressure. Even, like you said, hearing the term like dark horse all the time, which, by the way, is very, very flattering. If you consider who's in this pool, like it's very flattering. I definitely listened to your podcast where you kind of
thank you
ranked everybody, and like it was kind of double-edged because I didn't want to get a big ego about it or anything like that, or just like over rotate on something like a ranking and overlook somebody. So there wasn't very much external pressure, but I think I built up a decent amount of just internal pressure because I do have like a competitive streak and I can kind of turn it on if I want to. I'm very, very motivated by like negative or dismissive feedback. And I'm kind of glad there was like a tiny bit of that I was able to find, and all of it was very fair. So it was pretty useful for me. I think if you look at it objectively, like going in, like the quarterfinalists who don't have buys, like none of us have more than like 5% chance to win it all. I don't know. You kind of can't really feel too much pressure coming in as just like a non-seeded person.
So word on the street is that you actually flew into Culver City really late compared to everyone else. Could you tell us what happened there, and perhaps if there were any consequences, did it affect your state of mind going into or during your quarterfinal match at all?
Yeah, so as a refresher on the schedule, I think the normal schedule for most of the people competing in the TOC was to fly in on Saturday, go through COVID protocol stuff on Sunday, and then do rehearsal and the Jeopardy honors ceremony on Monday before the actual tournament kicked off on Tuesday. So I couldn't fly in on Saturday. I had a prior engagement on Sunday that I really couldn't miss, so I got approval from the producers to take like a really late night flight on Sunday night, trying to get in to Culver City around 11 p.m. I had some flight delays, like LAX was kind of LAX, and so by the time I got to the hotel, it was 2 a.m. and then I had to be ready for the COVID test shuttle to pick me up at 6 a.m. So that was not like the best way to kind of set yourself up for success. I would say like the only real consequence of that was I was so tired during Jeopardy Honors that day. It was like a really great event, but it was a little bit surreal because it felt a little bit like being treated as like a minor celebrity, and I was just like really tired, and I don't know if I had like the same level of energy that some other folks had. I mean, we also had promo photos, but the most important part of that in my mind is like the 15 clue rehearsal that you get, and so my 15 clue rehearsal was awful. I'm not going to blame like the travel for any of that. I faced John Vogt and Brian Chang in that rehearsal, and I think out of 15 clues I got in on one. Like that rehearsal like was the first time I'd ever really felt defeated, helpless for any like real amount of time playing the game. And so I kind of had to deal with that going into the quarterfinals.
I think that's all the questions I have for you about things prior to the tournament. Let's move on to the games themselves, starting with your quarterfinal match against 11-game champion Jonathan Fisher and 4-game champion Christine Whelchel. First, let me ask you, did you have any pregame thoughts for this matchup? Maybe something to keep in mind about Jonathan or Christine that might change the way you play? Maybe some thoughts you had about the tiredness you were talking about, how you would, deal with that?
So I was not, when this matchup was announced, like I wasn't super thrilled. Jonathan covers most of my weaknesses, like from a knowledge standpoint. I think when that happens, the randomness of the categories becomes like a really big factor, and that's never like a great feeling because that randomness always exists, but when there's not too much overlap and you're not necessarily going to be fighting over the same stuff, like all the stuff that I'm not super good at is like he is like in his wheelhouse, right? So it's not a great feeling to be at the mercy of the kind of like board composition. With Christine, I don't know if anybody really caught this, but if you look at the kind of the official stats that Jeopardy posted with kind of like their proprietary buzzer data type stuff, Christine by the stats had top tier buzzer timing. It's like Mattea, Sam, Matt, Amy, Christine. Talk about like my mindset coming in. I know that Jonathan and Christine are both just so fast. Their timing is so good. So that's like just a tremendous X factor. As far as the specific opponents affecting like kind of the gameplay, I kind of told myself that if I'm in Double Jeopardy and the board goes like pop culture heavy, for example, like so much of that money is going to have not my name on it, like either Jonathan's name or Christine's name on it. So even if I kind of get my way and do the daily double hunting thing and find them early, like on balance, like I probably have to bet a bit larger. Like the pattern of some of these games is just like you're looking for the daily doubles in like places that are both like likely and places that you feel like you can convert them. So like the flow of the game a lot of the times is like you find the daily doubles, you convert them, but then you kind of like start to bleed a little bit because the stuff that's at the end of the game might be stuff that you don't really want. So that, there's not too much that you want to fix for opponents, but that's definitely one of them to keep in mind. Like if you have a notion of how their strengths overlap with yours, like maybe you do some wagering adjustments.
In Double Jeopardy, Jonathan did not let up as he continued to win the buzzer battle. According to Geometry, Jonathan uncovered 3 to 4 extra clues and about $3,700 worth of extra opportunities to answer through buzzer timing in Double Jeopardy. But Andrew wasn't going to go down without a fight. While he may have lost some opportunities to Jonathan on the buzzer, Andrew picked up roughly 4 to 5 extra clues and $6,400 worth of extra opportunities to answer by buzzing in on clues that neither Jonathan or Christine attempted. This, plus the fact he found both daily doubles in the round, helped him keep him in contention to win. Speaking of which, I gotta give you props, Andrew, for hanging in there even when you missed that third daily double. With half the board remaining, Jonathan could have won the game in a lock, but you managed to accumulate just enough to win if Jonathan got Final Jeopardy wrong. And dare I say, getting that third daily double wrong might have worked in your favor since Final was a triple stumper. I'd imagine Jonathan would have made a wager similar to yours if he were in second going into Final and he would have won instead.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's pretty good analysis. Final Jeopardy is like very interesting to talk about, but you might have a question about that later. So
possibly, yeah. Watching it back on TV, did you think to yourself, yeah, maybe I should have gotten that one? Or were you perhaps too focused on the image of the coin to come up with Brutus? Or was that clue something you definitely didn't know?
I would say, if anything, I was not focused enough on the image of the coin. So this was a video daily double. They throw it up on the second screen, and maybe like a bit of a spoiler alert, like there's this recurring theme in the tournament where like the video clues, for the most part, don't go my way. As like an aside, like maybe this is inside Jeopardy knowledge, but I think they moved the second screen. It used to be like a TV on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I think they moved it up beneath the score. So I don't know. Maybe that like messed with it a little bit, or it made it harder for me to.
Wait, they moved it beneath the scores?
Yeah, it like hangs up right under the scores. Like when you look up and to the left, and that's where the video board.
That's so weird. Why would they put it there?
I think that's where it was. Yeah, and so like I remember having a squint and like kind of look up. Like up in the direction, but then look back at the clue board because the text, they don't put the text up on the video board.
Mm-hmm.
They basically showed a picture of a coin with some daggers, and it has this phrase "Ide Mar" on that's written on it, and I think "Ide Mar" is in the clue. It's like an assassin's coin, basically. I think if you're listing famous assassins like in Jeopardy, there's probably a good argument that like it's like John Wilkes Booth, and then Brutus is like the next name, right? I didn't really process like I was in like this mode where I'm like, I'm going to try to see if there's any like Pavlovian response that I get from this. Mm. And like, I just couldn't move off of that, Like I think when I watch it at home, like Ide Mar is like it's literally the Ides of March, right? Mm. But I think, I'm reading the clue in my head, like I'm not really listening to Ken too much. Like EID, I'm like, oh, is that like Eid Mubarak or something like that? So I'm going down this like totally different path anyway. Like when Ken says it's Brutus, like I'm actually like really embarrassed, like I'm willing to bet that like everybody else knows this one, and like I just like got the yips and I lose $10,000 right there. So
what was your thought process like going through this final? I had no clue because I'm bad at literature. In general, is one of my weakest points, but I thought Holmes was a good guess considering how final clues in the TOC sometimes require a deeper set of knowledge.
Yeah, I didn't put like Holmes would probably. I didn't feel great putting down Holmes. Like I thought even for TOC, like maybe it's just like not. It's slightly deeper than even the TOC would go. Maybe, I don't know. I think if you read the clue, there's a lot of phrases that like kind of jump out, but I wasn't able to really connect them anywhere. There's a phrase. I don't have the clue text in front of me actually.
Battle of Lovell's Pond, Portland Gazette, 1820, 13 years old.
Yeah. So I think where my brain is going is like, I think there's a phrase like his grandfather is in here, right? This poet's grandfather. Clearly, like this is an American poet, reminiscing about some battle that was fought like in the 1770s or something. The real Pavlovian connection here is like the word Portland, right? Portland is Maine and Longfellow is like the Maine poet. But I think I got fixated on like what poets have famous relatives, right? Like I think that the only person I could really think of was Oliver Wendell Holmes. And, that's not like it's not like a grandfather connection. There was some interesting context for this Final Jeopardy. I think first, if you look at the category poets, if it's poets, like not poems, not, I don't know. It's probably under like 50 possible responses, right? It's kind of like if you make a blind guess here, you'll be right a lot more often than if it was some other like world cities or I don't know. Actually, world cities is probably a bad example. But you can very reasonably blind guess this. You look at poets and you're like, I should be able to kind of prime myself for this, right? But then the problem is that there's like the wager and everything kind of around that, and what happened here is that like the wager really occupied like really 99% of my time. Like I didn't really prime myself with possible like directions where I thought this clue might go. Like on paper, it's really easy. I have more than 2/3 of Jonathan's score. So if he bets to cover me, like I make a small bet, which is what I ended up doing. But I think it was a little more complicated because the context here is like during the category reveal, Ken says something like, our category today is poets. Jonathan, we know you're good at plays, but like, let's see how good you three are with poetry, and we'll be back. And then I see Jonathan out of the corner of my eye. He gives like a little head tilt. He's like, I'm pretty sure he's grimacing. And then he makes like a I don't know if I'm imagining it, but he's like making an like type of sound. So I am standing there thinking like, I saw this, Like, does Jonathan like dislike this category? Like, I don't actually know if Jonathan likes poetry or not, but like, does this give away anything about what he's going to do? Like, is there a real chance he like doesn't like this and he decides to bet small, bet zero, something weird, right? Mm-hmm. And then, then you kind of like start debating yourself. You're like, well, okay, well, Jonathan is a trained actor. Is he trying to use his like well-honed powers to like do some chicanery here? A lot of the Final Jeopardy wagering, I actually took like the maximum amount of time. This might have been one of the ones where someone had to come over and say like, we need a wager from you. It actually really pained me because I thought there was a good chance that like Jonathan might like really not like it. Ultimately, I didn't read his reaction as like a bluff. I thought he wasn't trying to act, and he was actually doing kind of giving off a real tell, if you will. But I guess it just worked out.
That you bet to cover, and then you went with a small wager, beat him by $2.
Yeah, which is really, really fortunate.
Are there any other categories or clues that are worth mentioning before we move on?
There's a funny one because in the crocodile pop category, which Jonathan runs, like I see that category and I'm like, there is definitely a crocodile rock question. A crocodile rock clue is definitely going to be in here. And then it does come up and I'm excited to see it, and then I'm really sad that I didn't get that one. My girlfriend's in the audience, and her parents have shown me like her childhood videos and that sort of thing. And like one of the ones that we always watch is like her little song and like age 5 song and dance to Crocodile Rock. And so I know that she's in the audience and she's seeing this, and the same thing is going through her head. So it was a little painful not to get that one.
There's always those types of clues. I get that feeling.
Yeah.
So you beat Jonathan and Christine. I assume you're feeling pretty good knowing you'll get to play the next day. After watching the rest of the quarterfinals, whose win impressed you the most?
I think it's probably John Vogt because I think he had the only lock game, right?
Sam against Zach and Jessica.
Right. Yeah, I both of those were really impressive. It's hard for me to pick. I would probably say, I don't know about most impressive, but like my favorite of the quarterfinal games was Eric, Jackie, Jaskaran. Personally, like Jaskaran was my dark horse pick. And then just seeing Eric and Jackie, like watching Eric and Jackie play, like they are like my play style, like brethren, if you will. I think if you look at that game, Eric converts like I think it's like the back-to-back all-ins. Mm-hmm. And then Jackie just has this like amazing comeback. She's down like 15,000 or something, and she like claws back to make it a game. I found that to be really impressive. It's probably understated.
That was probably, in my opinion, the most balanced quarterfinal match. I know it was like arranged by seeding, but just thinking about it, I'm pretty sure that was like the most balanced it could possibly get between the quarterfinalists.
I think if you've played enough like kind of offline practice style games with people who are in the same realm as you, like that like games like that can kind of very easily go any way, right? Mm-hmm. If you're able to play that game like 100 times, like you get a pretty good distribution of wins for every single one of them.
Yeah, totally. Assuming the producers wouldn't put you in the same semifinal match as Amy, between Matt and Mattea, were you hoping to play against one more than the other?
I was so convinced they actually would put me against Amy. I think I know now that there is like an unofficial rule of kind of you postpone the rematches until they're absolutely necessary. But I think like one of the subplots of the TOC is just like, think about like the sheer rematch potential that we had in this TOC, right? Like you have Matt and Jonathan, you have Ryan, Eric, Megan, right? They all, that was like the line of succession, I guess.
Yeah.
Like you have Christine, Margaret, Maureen, and then there's me and Amy. I'm probably forgetting some, but that's a lot, right? Like after the quarterfinal round is over, like all those possible matchups are gone. Like it's just me and Amy, I think. If you have this like kind of subplot of rematches, like maybe you try to cash in on one of them. And so I actually thought that I would be facing Amy, and I don't know, like maybe I even had a slim preference for that because like you want the rematch, right? Like there's never a good time to play against Amy, but like you want the rematch. I think maybe the stats angle that I think you and a lot of other people have dug into is that Matt and Amy are, by the stats, maybe on a separate tier. So there's an argument that maybe you want to play Mattea, but Mattea is also the best player on the buzzer, like the data by a pretty big margin.
Yeah,
I think it's something like the official stat is like something like 71% of buzz is successful, which is just insane. And then you watch them win the exhibition where they also get like a really tough final that Matt and Amy don't get, and so you're like, I don't know, I don't want to play Mattea. And the matchup between me and Mattea, it's like a little bit like the Jonathan matchup where I don't know if our strengths really overlap. So the answer to your question is like Not really. I didn't really have a preference. I think begrudgingly do a rematch with Amy is what I had in my head. I think some people were telling me like, you're not going to get put up against Amy, but in my head I was like very ready.
So you were prepared for that possibility, even though everyone around you was like, no, they're going to save that for later.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't. I didn't know as firmly as maybe other people knew that maybe they don't do rematches.
So since you were the last semifinal match to tape, I assume once Matt, John, and Sam were called, you had some time to prepare for your matchup against Mattea and Jeric. Did you have any pregame thoughts here? Anything to keep in mind about these two in particular that might have changed your approach to the game?
I was really, really nervous before this game. We were in the Wheel of Fortune studio watching the game on the monitor. The end of Matt, John, and Sam, like the end of the semifinal, the final Jeopardy question, like I just skipped out on that, and I went to go like sit in the bathroom for like a couple minutes just to get kind of get it together. The main thought is basically you have to go for broke, and I don't know. That's I knew that Jeric was going to go for broke if he got if he got the chance to do it. I think like tendencies wise, you don't think Mattea is going to do it, but I'm pretty sure Mattea like evolved from the original run. I think they said in interviews that they would be more aggressive, and
I think I remember that too on Inside Jeopardy.
Yeah. And so you kind of have to take that into account and be like, you just want to squeak your way into the finals, right? You just want to make it through. Any way to do it.
In the Jeopardy round, to no surprise, Mattea was the fastest on the buzzer, getting in 58% of the time and earned about $2,100 worth of extra opportunities to answer through timing. Andrew, I actually don't remember this, but you had a couple of negs early in the round, which briefly put you in the red. And while you were able to get out of it rather quickly, you had an unfortunate timing with the first daily double, only being able to wager the table limit of 1,000. Could you tell us more about what happened there? As a quick refresher, the correct responses to the clues you were ruled incorrect were Hush Puppies, David, and Papusas.
Of these, like I think these were. I can explain the logic behind, like I can defend my own logic to myself on these negs. Like you never really want to have like this many in like before the first commercial break, basically. I do want to talk about the pupusas clue, which is basically just a video of a pupusa, and the clue is like this food is common in El Salvador, is as common in El Salvador as the taco or something like that. My problem here is that like my brain goes to arepas instead of pupusas. They're both very, very like tasty, not an indication of like a personal food ranking or anything, but arepas is not the right answer. I got in some trouble for missing this. My girlfriend's sister-in-law is Salvadoran, and we've actually spent like an afternoon together like just making pupusas. And then unfortunately for me, there's a restaurant I walk past like pretty much every day close to my house that's a giant sign that says arepas. It doesn't say pupusas, it says arepas. Some wires get crossed, and post pupusas I am down like 5,000 magic beans, and I know there's at least a couple people who are gonna like angry emoji text me for this answer, but it's still early. It's like still right before the first commercial break. Hush Puppies, that's just like you're still in like your pattern matching mode, I would say, like your flashcard, just like see thing, say thing. I see like a brand of shoes plus like a dog, and my mind goes to Buster Brown. I'm pretty sure the Buster Brown dog is a bulldog and not, it's just like the thing that you say. You like you don't you
think one thing and then say something else, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
And Old Testament kings, I know that this is not my strong suit, but I think someone had already said Solomon, so I was like, okay, it's 50-50, right? And like I was pretty convinced that it was that I was going to say the right one, but I didn't.
When Tyler was on the last episode of the podcast, we were wondering if your dislike for Manny Patinkin was motivated by your secret distaste for the guy, or the fact that you'd have to play through a video category. For everyone listening, do you mind setting the record straight?
So I love that Tyler is like trying to stir the pot here. I don't know what you actually recorded, so. But for context, I decided to go for this Manny Patinkin category, knowing that it was a video category, and I think I was feeling like a little comfortable. I ad-libbed something like, let's just get this out of the way. And then I realized it kind of like makes it sound like Manny Patinkin is like my enemy or something like that. But like, no, it's just like, I'm looking at this category. It's like in the most important Jeopardy game so far. And I'm like, this is inconceivable, for lack of a better word, right? Like, this is like not a wheelhouse category for me. And it's also like a video category, which is like it's just a huge rhythm breaker in any game. If you look at the $800 clue in this category, it was like deadly. It was a very simple clue about like the Yiddish language, but after the clue text like ends, there's like 5 seconds of Mandy Patinkin singing in Yiddish, right? So like you're just like totally at the mercy of like the enabler. It's incredibly hard to like time your buzz. Obviously the video categories are like fun to watch at home, but like in the context of the game, I was just like, no, like not a video category in like, and I didn't expect to know anything about Mandy Patinkin, but it turns out I knew like a couple things. So I don't hate Mandy Patinkin. I have nothing against Mandy Patinkin.
I think it'd be remiss of me if we didn't talk about your all-in wagers on the second and third daily doubles. Once you got the second one, I knew you were going to do it, but the third one caught me completely off guard. I'm pretty sure I screamed, "Are you insane?" at my television. Walk us through both of those daily doubles. You didn't exactly find them back-to-back like Eric did in his quarterfinal match, but within 5 clues, you were able to quadruple your score and then some. How much of your decision to go all in was motivated by A, your general playstyle, and B, an urgency to counter Eric? Because if you ask me, I think the two of you play very similarly in that you're not afraid to go aggressive when the situation calls for it.
I think you're right that it was motivated by both of those things. Like generally, I try to play aggressively, and then at least for the first daily double of Double Jeopardy, there is an urgency to counter not just Eric but Mattea, because there's still a daily double out there, and you know that both of them are willing to double up if they find it. So for that first daily double, it's like $1,200. It's the $1,200 clue in World Leaders, which is like just a good academic type category. It's like it's a pretty easy decision. Like you said, you could probably predict that I would go all in here. The last all in, I think this is probably questionable. It works out in the end, but it's definitely questionable. Like I try to take everything in. Category dollar amount, it's elegies for $1,200. So medium difficulty clue, but it's in literature category, so it's probably pretty good. And then you kind of take a look at what categories are left on the board. I have this like mental math heuristic to kind of assign the remaining value to my opponents. And I think I got a little tripped up doing that math. And so all of a sudden, it's like already been like 10, 12 seconds. And Ken's like, I think they cut out a lot of this time, my deliberation time. I actually took kind of a lot of time trying to figure out what this wager was going to be.
So wait, the hesitation on your face wasn't you like, should I go all in? It was more so like you trying to assign that math to Mattea and Eric?
I mean, in the process of trying to, it's in the process of trying to decide like what the wager is going to be. Like, like always all in is like a decent heuristic. There's not too many situations where you're giving up like a ton of like win percentage by going all in.
Yeah, there was still plenty of money left. It was the 7th clue of the round too.
Yeah, if you see the way the game played out, it's like very, very tempting to say it was for sure the right decision. I talked to John Vogt about this, and it's probably a little bit results oriented to think about that. Like you're thinking about how Eric played the rest of that game, and you're like, that is the only way the rest of that game plays out. But I don't think that's necessarily that true. That like, I think in a lot of the cases, like Eric doesn't, or Mattea, they don't make like that big of a run. And so I have like a really big lead at that point. Like I think I have something like an $11,000 lead. Like maybe bet like 11,000 instead of 16,800. It kind of accomplishes the same thing and it protects you a little bit on the downside. So in the moment, I probably like flipped out like just a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit of like hubris, like, oh, this is your Roger Craig go all in moment. That's my take on the daily doubles there.
Are there any other categories or clues that are worth mentioning before we move on?
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to Alex Jacob for one of these clues. There's a $1,600 clue in the religion category that's basically about a high-ranking Buddhist figure who is not the Dalai Lama. And so the only reason that I knew that this was Panchen Lama is because I'm in Alex Jacobs' School of Trivia League, and I missed a really, really similar question, and I made a note of it. And so he definitely deserves like a shout out for this particular clue. Is
this your endorsement for School of Trivia?
How much am I being paid?
We'll have to ask Alex after this podcast. All right, moving on to the finals of the TOC. It was a heated showdown between Amy, Andrew, and Sam. First of 3, and you three almost went the distance. The series lasted 6 games. Sam won game 5, Andrew won games 1 and 3, and Amy won games 2, 4, and 6. Starting with game 1, I thought this was a fantastic opener to the finals. There were so many lead changes throughout, and by the end of Double Jeopardy, everyone had a decent chance of winning the game. According to the Final Jeopardy win matrix on Geometry, Andrew had a 50% chance of winning, while Amy and Sam each had a 25% chance. Andrew would win in the event of a triple correct, Sam would win in the event of a triple stumper, and Amy would win if she got final right and Andrew got final wrong. Once again, Andrew showed absolutely no fear in going all in on the first and second daily doubles, picking up $9,600. Sam found the third daily double, but he was unfortunately incorrect, costing him $6,000. Had he gotten that daily double right, it's likely Sam would have been first going into final, and who knows, maybe he would have taken the first game of the series. Some other stats: best on the buzzer this game was Sam, getting in 52% of the time, and earned about $4,700 worth of extra opportunities to answer through timing. In terms of getting the most value out of their successful buzzes, which is basically a longer way of asking whose incorrect responses hurt them the least, that would be Amy, only getting one clue wrong, costing her $2,000. For Coryat scores, Sam finished with the best Coryat at 18,000, Amy at 14,600, and Andrew at 10,800. And finally, a fun fact: aside from 3 triple stumpers and Sam's miss on the third daily double, there were 0 incorrect responses in Double Jeopardy. With all that being said, Andrew, how did it feel to not only win the first game of the series, but also to be the second person who's ever defeated Amy Schneider in a game of Jeopardy?
Okay, so on paper, like, I should be super thrilled at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think on the stage, it honestly is like a bit of a mixed bag. Having the first win is really great. Having it be the rematch win is like even better. It's super validating. It's like I can hang, but like you said, outside of the daily doubles, like Amy and Sam, the board, they're just like kind of knocking me around. So even though, there's all that good stuff, like the next game is in 20 minutes or so, and like you just like have to try to fight off the imposter syndrome that like you stole this one. It kicks in just like a little bit. But yeah, like on paper, it's like everything that I would have asked for. If you told me that would happen like before the tournament, I would be like, thank you.
The final Jeopardy category for this game was Geography, which makes sense after the clue was revealed, but it wasn't as obvious to me watching on TV. What did you make of this category, and how much of it affected your wager, if at all?
I didn't really know what to make of it. Again, it didn't seem super broad. I think if I had a blind guess here, it would be something related to like the Shah of Iran or the Rohingya people, maybe. I thought it would kind of be like a history question in disguise. So the category is like always, it's always going to be like an input into whatever process you have for wagering. I thought all in all, the situation here was pretty straightforward. Kind of as it turns out, the clue was about current events, and I just read about this current event of the president of Sri Lanka resigning. I was kind of relieved to get to finally get this Final Jeopardy right.
Are there any categories or clues in Game 1 of the finals that are worth mentioning before we move on?
Yes, I have one that is really fun to mention. I have to call out. There was a clue about The Office. It was about Kate Flannery, who plays Meredith. So she actually, on Twitter, she noticed that she had made it into a Jeopardy clue, and she tweeted about it. And it just so happens that I have like a treasured photo of me and my friends. This is taken back in like 2007 in LA, where I think we're on spring break or something, and we're driving around this parking lot, and we just like see her and Oscar in from The Office in the parking lot, and we just like drop everything we're doing and we ask for a photo. So I have this kind of old photo of me and Kate Flannery, and so I tweeted at her and I said, thank you for helping me win this game. And she saw it and she got really excited, and it was just like I don't know, it was a lot of fun for me and my friends.
Next up, Game 2 of the finals, which featured a very strong performance from Amy, in spite of Andrew maintaining a lead for most of the game. Sam was still the fastest on the buzzer, getting in 50% of the time, but Amy was really able to excel in Double Jeopardy by buzzing in on clues Andrew and Sam weren't attempting. Doing so allowed Amy to pick up about $5,600 worth of extra opportunities to answer in the round. On top of this, Amy had only one incorrect response the entire game, which cost her a mere $800 in potential value. As such, she had the best score on buzz percentage at 96%. Andrew was in the lead going into final with a $1,000 margin, with help from the first and third daily doubles, picking up a total of $13,800. Unfortunately, a triple stumper and a conservative wager from Amy was what allowed her to win Game 2 and secure her first win of the series. Andrew, I noticed in Double Jeopardy that of the 5 triple stumpers in the round, 4 of them came from the first time responses category, clues whose responses that have never been on the show before. Looking back on it, do some of them seem obvious to you, or are you still mystified by the clues in this category?
I wouldn't say any of the clues in the category were just like utterly mystifying. I think they're just generally very fair things to know that, you know, you might have encountered, but like maybe because they're not popping up all the time in J Archive, like none of us really fully internalized them to like really that degree for some of the other answers.
Makes sense.
I will say, like, despite how bad we were in that category, like I really like categories like this. It does like kind of have a tendency to like expand the Jeopardy canon a little bit. Everything, like I said, everything is somewhat familiar. I'm 100% sure that everybody in this tournament probably used J-Archive to prepare. And this category is just like the writer's way of being like, oh, that's cute. Like you thought you could just like pattern match your way through this game. Like Jeric, I know you're a fan of video games. Mm-hmm. Like, isn't this like exactly like how you would balance a game? Like, you know, people are overusing the strategy of like leaning on J-Archive or something like that.
Sure.
And so you're just like, let's nerf this a tiny bit, right? So, like on a theoretical level, I like it. Like, but I don't want to be the one playing it, you know?
Yeah, a little conspiracy there for you guys listening. Names the Same was the final Jeopardy category for this game, which sounds like it could be an easy clue since you probably have 2 ways of getting to that same name. Was that perhaps a reason why you were comfortable wagering to cover Amy, or were you always planning to wager to cover if you were in the lead going into final, regardless of the category?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. The category is pretty much telling us that the clue is going to have multiple ways in. So in this situation, I just thought a cover bet would be fine. As for, you know, like always planning to do something, like it's really hard to say that you'll always do something. Like if you say you're always going to make the cover bet, like that definitely makes you a bit exploitable. And that's, you know, there's some neatness to this format where like you start to get to see, like, first of all, you get to know people's tendencies. That was something I didn't really pay enough attention to, I would say. Tendencies can definitely evolve in this type of format. So if you're going to say I'm always doing something, like maybe that's too predictable. Maybe. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to maybe I should just stop talking.
Game 2 of the finals was actually the last game of the tape day, so you were able to get some rest, at least I hope, before returning to the studio the following morning. Heading back to the hotel late in the evening, can you recall what you were thinking about on the shuttle ride back? Maybe an adjustment to your final strategy, planning for a last-minute cram session, or was this more of an opportunity to, you know, get in touch with yourself and decompress some of your stress and anxiety?
That entire night was, I think, very stressful. Ordinarily, I'd be thrilled to be tied, and I definitely was, like, at certain points in the night, just, like, kind of mentally going through. But it was really a roller coaster. I know that there was one thing I was kind of beating myself up about that night, which is that, like, all the things that I did in my preparation, like, out of all the things that I did, like, I didn't really think through some of these implications of the best of 3. And, like, I'll give you one example, which is after every game, Ken comes out, like, you know, you kind of do the overheard segments. Ken comes out and he's like, one of the things he asks about is like, what's your rationale behind the wager? And then you get to hear kind of what everybody else is saying, and it feels like at first like any normal segment, but then you realize that in this, I think it can take on like a lot of importance in this type of format, right? Like what is said there, what's not said there. Like it could have a big impact. Like, are people revealing things? Is anyone bluffing? Like, should I be bluffing? Like, should I like, one thing I didn't ever think about was like that Ken would come around and ask me like, oh, like, what's your plan here? Like when you, like, just kind of like how you just asked me, like, what is your plan here? And it never crossed my mind that like, maybe it makes sense to sometimes like lay the trap if the situation makes sense. That's just something that I just felt like in the few hours that I had that night, like I couldn't really analyze that situation to be like, how should I be like listening in there? Like, what should I be saying? I think if we see this in the future, like I would love to see like some mind games. I think there's not too much mind gaming that happened between all of us. There's one moment where Sam, at some point in response to a Ken question, basically was like, I'm going all in all the time. I'm just like, is this real? Like, are you actually like, I on some level I believe him, right? But it's like, can you actually trust? Like, is this a trap? Normally you don't like you don't think too deeply about this, but that was one of the things that really stressed me out.
So game 3 of the finals, it's the first game of the day, and by the end of the Jeopardy round, I think it's safe to say all three of you benefited from a night of rest because the scores were pretty much even. Amy and Andrew were tied at $3,800 each, while Sam wasn't too far behind with $3,600. Andrew found the first daily double as the 11th clue in the round, but he was only able to wager $1,000 since he had less than that amount. In Double Jeopardy, Amy found the second daily double as the 6th clue in the round, but unfortunately she got it wrong, which cost her $5,000. From there, Amy had a relatively quiet remainder of the game as she went 11 clues without a successful buzz from clues 14 to 24. Meanwhile, Andrew found the third daily double as the 20th clue in the game, and seeing as how he had less than half of Sam's score, he went all in and went into final in second behind Sam by $1,600. It's also worth noting that Sam had 0 incorrect responses in this game, answering all 18 of his successful buzzes correctly. Up to this point, I'd argue this was Sam's best performance in spite of having a lower Quariat score. He had the best Quariat in the game with 14,800, had an accuracy of 100%, and went into final in first. One correct response in Final Jeopardy was all it took to give Sam his first victory, and he could have, based on the controversy this final clue generated online. Apparently, Hebrews was incorrect, and Romans should have been accepted as the correct response. This would have meant Sam would have been the only one to get final right, which would have awarded him his first win in the finals. Andrew, while your response was neither Hebrews or Romans, I'd still like to ask you about what happened with this final. Was there any discussion of this clue among the three of you or with the other TOC folks while taping? Was it ever disputed or brought up to the judges? Because while I certainly didn't know the answer to this one, a lot of biblical scholars and fans of Jeopardy were pretty upset on Sam's behalf.
The three of us definitely didn't notice that anything was amiss after this was this sort of happened. It was just kind of on to the next game. When it aired, I think pretty early on, even before it kind of got around to most of like biblical scholar internet, I heard through the grapevine that some people in the audience like actually did predict that this would be like they noticed something, but this wasn't something that we discussed. If someone noticed, there was just a lot going on, and I don't think people really brought it up. I don't really have the expertise here to, I think it has definitely been played out on Twitter, like internet. It's definitely fair game. If I had gotten the win with an asterisk, like, I don't know, maybe that's fun. Like, honestly, I might take that. I'm just glad that it played out the way it did, I guess.
Before we move on to game 4, I have to give praise to your 3201 wager here, because if you got final right, you'd win not only if Sam wagered 0, which could have happened since he'd done it twice in the finals already, but you'd also win if he got final right and wagered up to $15.99, which is one less than the difference between your scores before final. You beat Sam by $2 if he got final right and opted not to wager to cover, which is something I didn't discover until quite recently. In fact, in my own game, my optimal minimum wager to finish second should have been 1201 instead of 601 to account for this possibility. Did learning wagering strategy / game theory come naturally to you? Because for me, I remember spending a lot of time on JArchive, timing myself to do the math on an index card in less than 5 minutes for almost every probable scenario.
I wouldn't say this came naturally to me. I had to do exactly what you did in terms of the index card math, learning all the different scenarios. I do enjoy math. Like, I enjoy thinking about like the strategies of games and that sort of thing. And so maybe that like predisposes me to like pursue that angle towards trying to get better at the game. But I think there's so many scenarios that they don't really like appear frequently enough for you to like feel like, oh, I know what the natural thing is to do in this situation, right? And so there are honestly many days in the leading up to like the original run, the TOC, where I would kind of spend like 1 to 2 hours just with like a stack of index cards and like go through games. Like I would definitely use the wagering calculator, just make sure you don't make like arithmetic mistakes and you understand like a few of the most common scenarios. That's like, I think that is just as important as whatever hours you spend on like Shakespeare summaries or like knowing what Dickens novels there are, for example, or like memorizing Oscar winners. Definitely for the regular season, I think just understanding, for example, like the 2/3 rule, like what a crush game is and how you can kind of win from second. That's like a ton of bang for your buck, right? And maybe that doesn't come super naturally, but it's really worth it's really worth putting that time in.
Are there any other categories or clues that are worth mentioning before we move on to game 4?
Yeah, so in Double Jeopardy, there's this fun wordplay category called spellimentary, where they're chaining together the names of these chemical elements, and we have to kind of first convert the chemical elements into their chemical symbols, and then that spells out a word. So one of the clues was like calcium plus iron, right? So we have to convert that to Ca plus Fe, which is cafe. So we first go to the category, and nobody, like, it seems like nobody's afraid of this. Like, everybody likes this. Amy gets the first one. Like, I get the second one, and I go back with the intention of, no matter what, I think I know this. Like, I'm gonna try to buzz in first and just figure out, like, I'm just gonna focus on the buzz, and then if I have time, like, I can reason this out. The $2,000 one in this category is arsenic plus tellurium plus radon. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do what I said. Like, I get the buzz in, and I start trying to piece it together. And I know that I know the individual components, right? Like, arsenic is AS, tellurium is TE, radon is RN. I add them together, and my brain is just like broken at this point. It's like I'm like, astern. What is astern? You know, like, there is no way astern is a word. So there's a part of me that's like, okay, you can just say what is astern, but like, you are going to look dumb. So I was trying, I had like 2 seconds left. I tried to figure out what's wrong, and then I basically ran out of time. And as it turns out, like, there's the tricky part here is that, like, you can easily put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. I actually think Amy got tripped up on this also after I got this wrong, because it's clearly just like a stern, right? And which is like, I don't know. I'm not. I don't do a ton of recreational boating, so so I don't. It's like, okay, it's the back of the boat. It's like towards the back of the boat, but like, I don't say astern, like, ever. Maybe if I said astern, I would have just gotten credit. Anyway, when the episode airs, like, I see on Twitter that Ken is like claiming direct responsibility for, like, he's like, I thought that we should have a tricky one, like, in this particular category. So, like, that was not super fun. Feeling like you kind of got caught up in, like, Professor Ken's, like, magical trap. Yeah, especially because it's like minus 2,000, right? That's like pretty painful.
So moving on to game 4 of the finals, it featured a dominant performance by Amy, who maintained her lead for most of the game until Sam found the first daily double in Double Jeopardy. But in the end, Amy finished the round in first, going into final with 25,000, Sam not too far behind with an even 20,000, and Andrew with 6,800. Whereas Amy won game 2 because of her depth of knowledge, her buzzer timing was what propelled her to victory this time around. In raw attempts, Sam had the most with 50, while Amy and Andrew tied with 47 each. However, Amy's buzz percentage was 60, while Sam's was 40, and Andrew's was 23. Amy was able to respond to about 9 to 10 extra clues and earn about $8,600 in extra opportunities to answer through timing. And while Sam did struggle to find his timing in the Jeopardy round, he was able to find his rhythm in Double Jeopardy, earning about $4,900 worth of extra opportunities to answer and respond to 3 to 4 extra clues. I wish I could say the same for Andrew, but unfortunately, between having only $1,600 to wager on the first daily double, losing the buzzer race to Amy and Sam, and not having the same board control you're used to having to find the daily doubles in Double Jeopardy, you were in a tough position going into final. There was a non-zero chance that Andrew could have won this game, but the circumstances to make that happen were very unlikely. So, Andrew, did your buzzer malfunction between the third and fourth games? Were the producers passing out coffee and you just didn't drink a cup?
No, the real story is Karina put gin in my tiny little water bottle. No, I don't have a good answer, honestly. I knew something was really, really off in Double Jeopardy. I think when you're playing against people who really have their timing down, like, the skill you really need is to, like, be able to reliably alter your timing by like 20 or 30 milliseconds or something like that. I don't know, sometimes in either direction, because maybe sometimes you're buzzing in too early. I really, it's really hard for me to, I think I was just a little slow. It's really difficult to say.
Did Corinna ever, like, come to you during, like, the commercial break or after the Jeopardy rounds and say, hey, you're coming in too early or too late, or was that, like, not?
No, I think no, because I think that's more of a regular, I'm not sure. I think that's more of a regular season thing, because I think in general we're all a little bit more comfortable. I think this was my worst buzzer game, like, ever. Yeah, I think you said it right, which is that I had just as many attempts as Amy or something like that, and I just got totally crushed. Like, I hadn't ever played against Sam, but one of the things I distinctively remember about Amy is, like, how quickly she was able to, like take over in Double Jeopardy, right? So I think Amy somehow, like innately, or maybe she practiced this, just has like a better feel for it than I do.
Yeah, the episode of Post Podium isn't out yet with John Vogt, but in that episode we talked about this game specifically as an example for geometry, and yeah, he couldn't come up with a good answer either. It just comes and goes. We concluded
there's things you can try. Like I know Matt Amodio. He had a comment at one point that was really insightful, which is that like if you're good at like the lower value, the harder clues, so the ones that are lower on the board, those tend to be like a little less contested, right? If you really, really focus and you really pay attention, a lot of the times you're going to be the only person buzzing in. When I press the button, like does my like little red light on top of my lectern, does that show up immediately, or is there like a little delay? If there's a little delay, like you're probably getting locked out, right? Like you're probably too slow. Like you're just trying to find small ways to gain like a little bit of information. It's really tough though. It's really, really tough because it's also dependent on what your opponents are doing.
I'm actually curious now. What was your buzzer grip? Because we all saw that Sam had like the two-handed approach with one hand on top and the other hand holding the buzzer. What was yours?
Oh, right. Like I'm definitely like the school of the Fritz Holznagel's, that like very standard like grip. I had the buzzer in my right hand, like kind of grip my left wrist, like to minimize like any excessive movement, like just what the doctor orders in the Secrets of the Buzzer book.
Gotcha.
Is the grip. Yeah.
Good book. Highly recommend for anyone looking to go on the show. According to my calculations, Andrew's minimum wager for this game was $3,200, but since he needed to get final right anyway, he could have wagered everything. Meanwhile, Amy had a few choices of wagers, considering Andrew was one win away from winning the TOC. She could either A, wager 15,001 to cover Sam up to 18,199, or B, wager somewhere between 1401 and 49.99. However, there is some downside to option A. If Amy wagers to cover, gets final wrong, Sam wagers everything, and he gets final wrong, there's a chance Andrew could win if he wagers at least 3,200 and gets final right. He beat Amy by $1 to win the TOC, and this is the non-zero chance I was alluding to earlier. So, what does Amy do instead? She wagers 6,000, which is enough to stay above Andrew's maximum score, and enough to win in a triple stumper if Sam wagers more than 1,000. And surely enough, he did. Sam wagered all of his 20,000, dropping him to 0, giving Amy her second win with a final score of 19,000. Now, while I do understand Amy's rationale, and I like her conservative wager here for the purposes of denying Andrew complete victory, I think she could have gotten even more conservative by capping her wager at $49.99. If she was betting to win on a triple stumper, wagering at max $49.99 puts her $1 above Sam if he decides to wager 0, which, again, is possible considering he's wagered 0 before, although from third place as opposed to second. Had he wagered 0 in this game, Sam would have won by 1,000. Now, if I had to guess, when considering her wager, Amy was probably thinking something along the lines of, if final's a triple stumper, great, I'll have my second win. If not, Sam's probably going to win since I'm not wagering to cover. And that's fine, because I'd rather give Sam his first win and extend the series over a slight chance of handing Andrew the entire tournament. What do you think, Andrew? I know you can't speak for Amy, but if you were in her position, would you have the same or similar mindset approaching this final?
It's really hard to say. Generally, like the attitude around wagering is that there's a few easy bang for your buck things, and then there's kind of this like long tail of like more subtle, complicated scenarios, right? I was pretty impressed with Amy's move here. It's one of those like first to three scenarios that doesn't show up in the regular season. I haven't really done the math on this, but like it's probably true that a bunch of different moves make sense here, and they all just depend on what your assumptions are, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think the natural criticism of Amy's move is like, well, you know, you can kind of see that like Andrew is 1 for 4 on like, sorry, I'm speaking about myself in the third person, but like, you know, if I'm Amy, I'm like, oh, well, Andrew's 1 for 4 on final. You know, he's not doing great on final. For him to win, he needs to get the question right by himself. Sam needs to go kind of off book, like do like something like an all in. So, you know, is it worth giving up any of the winning chances like I might have to defend against like this probably pretty small scenario, right? But then you can kind of justify it and you say like, if I'm in Amy's position, like maybe I believe over the long run, like I'm actually like the best player. So like if I concede, if I concede like this one thing to Sam, like fight it another day, like be in a slightly better scenario, Andrew is liable to miss like a all in eventually, right? So maybe you play to avoid the instant loss. Like maybe that's worth it. It's like, so I don't know. I think if it were me, I'm not sure that I would do the same thing. It really is a lot to think about in a few minutes, right? Like This is what I'm talking about when I say like you wish you could have been prepared to see some of these things like before you encountered them, but like we're kind of like learning on the fly here. I think someone who's better at preparation might have like been able to suss out situations like this before making it to the finals, but that wasn't me.
Yeah, I think this Tournament of Champions first of three format is a good learning opportunity for if they ever bring this format back for the next Tournament of Champions or whenever they do another first of three, they can learn from your wagers, like what the thought process was. So if this ever comes back in the future, players are better prepared for these scenarios that you found yourself in, because this was a format that hadn't been used since the GOAT tournament in 2019 or 2020, I believe.
Yeah, and I don't know. I actually am not sure. I can't remember, but I don't really think some of these like I don't think this particular scenario popped up, but I could be wrong about that. Like in that format, because there was a 2-1 lead at some point, but I think maybe Brad was not as big of a factor.
Yeah, he was particularly struggling, I remember, from that tournament. Last comment about this final. I actually don't dislike Sam's all-in wager here, considering what Amy has to do to prevent Andrew from winning the tournament. It's the perfect opportunity to stray away from what I'd recommend, which is wagering somewhere between 5,001 and 6,399, beating a zero wager from Amy and staying above Andrew's maximum score. Moving on to Game 5 of the finals, in spite of having the lowest Koryat score. No help from any daily doubles. The least number of attempts, the lowest score on buzz percentage, and was at one point in the red at negative 2,800. Sam managed to eke out his first finals victory. This one's a bit weird in that I don't remember this game being particularly outstanding for any of you three. I mean, at one point, Amy had a score that was more than 5 times Sam's, who was in second with 1,600, but that lead quickly evaporated after Sam responded correctly to 3 consecutive clues early in Double Jeopardy. Now, while Andrew was fortunate enough to find the second and third daily doubles back-to-back as the 9th and 10th clues in Double Jeopardy, a miss on the paint samples daily double cost him all of his 10,000, putting him at a major deficit. From here, Amy maintains the lead going into final, finishing with 15,800, Sam not too far behind with 11,200, and Andrew with 6,800. The category for final was English cities. Sam and Amy both got final right, but a collective gasp could be heard from the audience as Amy opted not to wager to cover Sam for the same reason as in Game 4, to prevent Andrew from winning the tournament, even if it meant giving Sam his first win. Knowing what had happened in Game 4, Andrew, were you expecting Amy to wager to shut you out rather than wager to cover Sam? We know the audience was surprised, but are you able to say the same?
I don't think I expected it. I thought it was a possibility after seeing that Game 4 bet, but then I looked at the category, English cities. It seems very, very wheelhouse for Amy, based on what I know of Amy. I'm not sure if I gasped or anything either. I do remember after it was all revealed that Sam had won his first game, like the roar from the crowd at that moment was just incredible. I think I entirely had blocked out like audience, like clapping, gasping, any rumblings from over there. But like that is the one memory I have of how happy everybody was to see Sam get one.
Yeah. I think at this point, while it was airing, I was hoping Sam would at least put one on the board just to make it more exciting and possibly force a 7-game series. I think a lot of people shared that feeling watching it from home. A few more questions for you, Andrew, before we move on to Game 6. Was the paint samples daily double something you 100% didn't know?
It was not like unfamiliar to me. Like the clue for this daily double was don't try to pet the cat in a tricky canvas by a French guy who invented a French term, basically. I don't remember, but I don't think this was an image clue. So the only thing I kind of fixated on in this, which is wrong, is the cat. I was again in this like wrong mode of like not doing comprehension and just trying to connect words that I saw. So I was like, well, cat in French is chat, right? Like, do I know any art terms that like have that? Like ultimately, like I've heard of trompe l'oeil, like if you look up in J Archive, like all the times this has ever come up, I think it also accompanies like the term optical illusion. So it's like a little switcheroo, right? You hide the optical illusion like behind like a phrase that is more like, this is a tricky canvas. Like you don't explicitly say optical illusion, and that like kind of breaks like the pattern matching, right? And just for a second there, like I'm not able to make that connection.
All right, we're in the home stretch now as we get to Game 6, the last game of the TOC finals. Sam was the fastest on the buzzer, getting in 52% of the time, but similar to Game 5, he had some real trouble with accuracy. Sam had 6 incorrect responses, including the first daily double, and finished with a score on buzz percentage of 34%. What's more is that Sam actually found all 3 daily doubles, but he wasn't able to capitalize on them as much as he could have. In the Jeopardy round, Sam went all in on the first daily double, but unfortunately he got it wrong, resetting him to 0, giving Andrew a much bigger lead. But that lead was far from safe, as Amy responded correctly to 5 consecutive clues, taking the lead away from Andrew and maintaining it for the remainder of the round. In Double Jeopardy, Sam found the second daily double as the first clue of the round, but he could only wager the table limit since his score was less than 2,000. Sam found the third daily double as the 10th clue, but he wagered less than half his score to reach an even 10,000. I was wondering what could have happened if Sam went all in here, but even if he did, he'd still be in third going into final. Everyone was pretty much even in terms of time and solo value, so by the end of Double Jeopardy, everyone was in contention for final. Amy was in the lead with 15,600, Andrew in second with 14,200, and Sam in third with 8,000. With how close Andrew was to Amy, Amy had to get final right to win, and lo and behold, she did, this time wagering enough to cover Andrew's maximum score. Still, I was a fan of both Andrew and Sam's wagers here. Andrew wagered 2801, which was enough to A, win into triple stumper, B, cover Sam's maximum score, and was C, more than enough to account for the off chance Sam wagers nothing. But the only way for Sam to win is if he's the only one to get final right, so he might as well wager everything. Now, I thought this final clue was pretty easy watching from home. I mean, the date provided should have been enough to tell you what famous event coincided with the performance. Did you feel the same, Andrew? If you did, do you remember what your thoughts were like as the last few seconds of the Think music played?
Yep. When I saw this clue and the way we all started writing immediately, like maybe even like before the Think music starts, I don't know, I pretty much knew I was done here. It went through my head that like unless Amy accidentally writes something like our Armenian cousin or something like that, like by accident, I'm just done, like donezo. But I guess stranger things have happened, right?
It's like GG in that moment.
Yeah, it was kind of like GG. Like I think if like I remember it was fun for me to like watch my own face, because it's like, I don't know, I can kind of tell like there's a subtle difference between like my normal poker face and just like my like, I'm kind of resigned here.
Are there any other categories or clues in Game 6 that are worth mentioning before we wrap up our game analysis and discussion?
So maybe the single clue that I have thought about the most is the $1,600 clue in Double Jeopardy in the PJ category. In 1979, this architect famous for his glass house in Connecticut was the first recipient of the Pritzker Prize. This clue like matches up super well with like, the whole pattern matching thing, and I know that this is Philip Johnson, and I just say, who's Johnson? I know that the answer is Philip Johnson, but Sam is the one who chooses this category, right? So there's like a little bit of the, I didn't choose this, I'm not going to pin all of the forgetting of the category requirement here, right? Which is PJ. Like you have to give both the first and the last name so that it matches the category, right? I think there's just a little bit of an effect from not being the person to select the category, so you get a little less of an opportunity to like recall that like there's a special requirement here,
Mm-hmm.
So obviously that is a wrong answer. That's a $3,200 swing because I did know the answer, right? If you look at the results from there, then maybe I have the lead in final instead of Amy, right? I don't know. Maybe I'll dissect the situation a little bit more, which is like some of this is off of Sam bouncing in the categories, right? Like I think if you ask some people, do you want to like go take stuff top down or do you want to bounce around? The argument for top down is that if there's some context that the earlier clues can give you for the later clues or the kind of reminder, a lot of people are concerned with how it'll affect like their own ability to come up with the answer, right? Like if I jump into a category right away, like I might not really be able to answer it. Like maybe I need the warm up or something. But I think this situation like shows a little bit of the flip side where Sam doing the bounce, like actually, you can make a case that it like somewhat affects me more than him. Like definitely I just forgot about this and And it's not like I don't think Sam did this intentionally or whatever. I'm not saying that. He's mostly just hunting for the daily double, and bouncing around is a good way to do that. But every few games there is like a category that has like a requirement like this, right? And you kind of sometimes you get the opportunity to catch an opponent off guard. I'm not saying you're like trying to win by making people say wrong answers, right? But that dynamic like definitely exists, and it definitely comes about as of bouncing. So I think that's an interesting thing to point out. Like, when if you think about whether you're bouncing or not, like it doesn't necessarily just affect you. It could also be an advantage or a disadvantage for another player.
So looking back on your TOC performance a few months later, is there anything about the way you played that still amazes you to this day? Do you have any regrets, or think about if things went differently during games 4 and 5? Any final thoughts before we move on to the TOC aftermath?
I'll start with regrets. I think it'd be really helpful and very healthy to not hold any real regrets. But there's definitely a lot to mull over. Watching these games again, you're reminded of the times you got smoked in game 4, game 5. We just talked about Philip Johnson. I'm 2 for 8 in Final Jeopardy in this tournament. Like, all that being said, to come really that close. If you were sure that you played your best games in mostly across the whole tournament, you'd feel like overwhelmingly pretty good, I would say. But I think if you have a couple things to overanalyze and point to, like, that regret might be dealing with that for a little bit. To your other question, which is there anything about the games that I find to be amazing? I think one of the really cool things was not like any particular gameplay moment, but it's hearing from certain people, like namely former TOC contestants, after during or after all of these games. Like, I got messages from Ben Ingram, who he won the TOC in 2013. I got a message from Roger Craig. Like, these are all great messages. Like, Roger Craig won the 2011 TOC. Alex Jacob was really following along and just getting really pumped. My favorite was Larissa Kelly from 2009 TOC. She sent me a message that was like, "Welcome to the Runners Up Club," and I was like, that feels super good. No exaggeration. Those are some of the people that were instrumental in me even wanting to be on the show in the first place, right? I've been a fan for a really long time. It's a good reminder that the community is awesome, and it doesn't really cost anything to make someone's day, right? Along with the regrets, I will also carry the feeling of, I don't know, it's the feeling that you made it, right?
So Amy wins the TOC. You guys taped 4 games, so I imagine it's probably the late afternoon / early evening. We all saw on Twitter that a couple of you stuck around to celebrate that night with some drinks and karaoke. Could you share with us one fun memory of that night, capping off what had been an absolute banger of a TOC?
Yes, so karaoke. There is a food hall right across the street from the Culver Hotel, which we were all staying at, which happens to have live karaoke on Thursday nights. We're lucky enough that the tournament ended on Thursday, and I don't think anybody actually knew that this was a thing. We just kind of were like, okay, we need a place to get something to eat. And then we walk into the patio and it's just a live band. We had really good attendance. I think we found out that the real grand prize of the TOC is not $250,000. It's getting to see Eric Ahasic and John Vogt sing Shania Twain top of their lungs, right? I think a couple folks from last year's TOC showed up as well. After karaoke, a bunch of us went back to the hotel lobby and we just kind of nerded out about the tournament still, because we had just been through this kind of crazy thing. It was really a great cap off of the whole tournament.
So in November 2022, so last month of when we're recording this, 2021 TOC winner Sam Cavanaugh posted a thread on Twitter about how he stopped watching Jeopardy shortly after he won the title and trophy. It's a fascinating thread. I highly recommend you read it. But the gist of why he stopped watching Jeopardy is because being on the Alex Trebek stage, you, the contestant, find yourself in a flow state. You're dialed in, ready on the buzzer, and nothing else matters for those 30 minutes. That's a feeling that can't be replicated anywhere else, not even by playing from the comfort of your own home. For Sam, it felt nearly impossible to enjoy Jeopardy casually without having to think about the amount of preparation he did leading up to his initial appearance. So my question for you, Andrew, is now that the hype and anticipation from the TOC has died down, what's your relationship with Jeopardy like now compared to what it was like maybe a year ago. Did you experience a post-Jeopardy hangover of some sort like Sam, or have you been keeping up with Chris Panulo's 21-game win streak and the rest of season 39? Ray Lalonde is the current champion, actually, right now.
I like the term my relationship with the show Jeopardy. It sounds very official. Like me and Jeopardy are like we're going steady. I totally understand what Sam is talking about. I think in this thread he mentioned, I'm not sure, maybe this is a conversation I had with him separately. I'm pretty sure he mentioned like your fight or flight instincts kick in, right? Which is part of what makes it kind of difficult to watch. Like prepping for just recording this, like rewatching all of my own games, it's not a calm, even though I know exactly what
sorry
happens.
I had to put you through that.
No. It's like it's not like a calm viewing experience, because you just like something spikes right in your body. Like maybe it's you hear the opening music and like it's like hair raising or something like that. So in terms of keeping up with season 39, like I've caught a few of everybody's games, but it's definitely like harder to watch casually, because you start to get back, you're like, oh, okay, I gotta track my score now, like I gotta see how I match up against
Yeah,
like, how do I match up against Chris Panulo?
You have to do that. You don't have to do that anymore.
How do I match? Yeah, but like I think you're just in it for so long, right? And like they expanded this TOC field, like it was 21 people. You had to kind of keep track of like 20 other people and think about like how maybe some people were able to get above this, but I was like down in the weeds, like trying to understand matchups and that sort of thing. I don't know if I have exactly the same relationship that Sam does with the show, but there's definitely like more to untangle, right? It's like I'm not exactly sure like when it'll be kind of just like the relaxing sit on the couch, like yell the answers out without feeling like I have to be in a competitive mode.
I should probably mention that to round off that Twitter thread, Sam talks about how getting to watch this year's TOC in person reinvigorated his passion for the game. He thanks the producers for inviting him back and hopes to one day compete on the Alex Trebek stage to play a game of Jeopardy that's as thrilling and competitive as the ones in this year's TOC. Last two questions for you, Andrew, before we wrap up our conversation here today. They're questions I actually haven't asked my guests in a while, but I think we'd all like to know. A, what's next for you in terms of a career? Are you still working as a software dev? And B, what are you going to do with the money, or what have you already done with the money?
Yeah, so career-wise, I'm not Amy Schneider. Not too much is changing. I'm sticking with software. I do want to say, going through the process, I learned a lot of stuff through stuff like YouTube. And I definitely had the idea of maybe trying to find something that dovetails like software, YouTube, try to kind of give back to this, like, I know you're a content creator also, but it's kind of like the first time I've ever really thought about like, maybe I need some like hobby project kind of around creating some educational content. Maybe I have like an interesting angle on this. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's like a little too cliche to want to try to be a writer or content maker like a post-Jeopardy, but it really like does get that going in terms of like what I want to do in the future. The money, like, yeah, it's pretty mundane. Like one of my friends, he was nice enough to host like a bunch of the watch parties at his house, so like definitely had to grab a nice dinner with him, like just as a way of saying thank you, like thank you for letting us like have your house as this like 3-week extravaganza like plays out. But, if I had to give, like, the Jeopardy answer, like, that's not mundane and not like, oh, I bought a desk or something. Like, I think I should probably commission Sam Buttrey to, like, write and perform some sort of song. Like, once his fame, like, dies down a little bit and, like, the price, maybe the price comes down or something like that. That seems like a total good use of money.
100%. Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Now, before I let you go, where can people find you online? And if there's anything you'd like to plug or anyone you'd like to shout out, go right ahead.
Cool. I'm very loosely on Twitter. My handle is GG_Andrew He. If you try to find me online, you'll probably find the other Andrew He, who is not me. He is like a superstar in the world of also programming. Yeah, good chance you'll find him instead. Shout out wise, like if anybody from the rest of the 2022 TOC folks, like if they're listening to this, like I definitely miss everybody. Hope our paths cross, And let's see. I will just put in a word for kind of like public libraries in general, I would say. During the whole Jeopardy process, I came to really understand how much like public libraries can do for like just like average person trying to like learn stuff. And then you realize that that's only like 0.5% of the stuff that system really does. You know, if you can kind of go out and see if there's a way you can support like children's story time or adult literacy, or, you know, providing good spaces for people just to be, like, that's the plug. That's it. Public libraries. They're the best thing we have going on right now.
I'll also interject by saying, if you're a librarian out there, I highly recommend you audition for Jeopardy. There's a good chance that you'll be the next Jeopardy giant killer based on the patterns we've seen in recent years.
Totally.
It's been a pleasure, Andrew. Thank you once again for taking some time to speak with me today. And now this is when I close out the show by asking you to please rate this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. Post-Podium is available on all sorts of listening platforms, including Amazon Music, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Stitcher. So make sure to follow and subscribe for the latest episodes. I've been your host, Jeric Brual, and remember, if someone asks what you're listening to, always phrase your response in the form of a question. What is post-podium? See you next time.